What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Halving Report podcast with myself, your host, Brad Mines. The price of Bitcoin is approximately 22.8 thousand US dollars, and there's about 450 days left until the next Bitcoin halving. Plan accordingly. Today, we have Jason Maier on the show. Jason is an American math high school teacher, and he's been seen on What Bitcoin Did podcast for writing his new book entitled A Progressive Case for Bitcoin. Furthermore, Peter is writing the foreword for A Progressive Case for Bitcoin, which is a book that examines Bitcoin through the lens of a liberal, a progressive, or a leftist. We are super excited to come across Jason and his work, so let's get right to it. Jason, welcome to the Halving Report podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
How's your weekend going so far?
Good. It's very, very cold. I think that it is absolutely dangerously cold outside right now, so we're just hunkered down and staying indoors as much as possible. Yeah, it's outside. I'm in the Northeast US, so it's like you're outside for more than a couple minutes, then it is you're in danger. So that's a very low key weekend. Yeah,
it's so cold. It starts to, like, your skin starts to hurt out there when you're out there for more than a few seconds.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it was minus 25. The wind was just nasty here. I'm in Niagara Falls area, Canada here. So yeah, I definitely feel your pain. How's the family? How's Toshi doing?
Toshi's good. You may have just heard him barking, actually. My poor daughter is like in charge of keeping the dog quiet when I'm like recording a podcast, but he's doing good. He loves running around and he doesn't mind the cold, so I have to protect him from being outside. So yeah, everybody's doing well. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. We have a 5-year-old husky, Siberian husky, and so he loves this weather, but and he's not very loud either. So he's not too distant. I think he's outside right now, actually. So no worries on my end about that.
Yeah.
So what struck me about you when I first came across you is, of course, you are a progressive Bitcoiner, like self-identified progressive. And me being in the space for a while now, I'm talking to a lot of libertarians, of course, and so you're sort of a rare find sometimes in this space. So whenever I see someone kind of your beliefs, I do like to talk to them, and because I do also self-identify as a progressive. So my question, I guess the first question I just want to ask you: how is progressive politics compatible with Bitcoin? The left is kind of seen as this, people that want to, regulate the markets. Bitcoin's kind of ungovernable in some aspect, for the most aspects, in the traditional sense. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think that my first thought is sort of like I like to just draw the distinction between sort of progressive like politicians, like the people who are actually in charge right now in our government, and sort of the people who vote for them. And it's like, just for many years, I've always gotten the sense that, like my liberal friends, like who are voting for Democrats, are doing that because that's sort of the best possible option. I'm not sure that, over the past 20 years, people have been super excited about the people who are in office on either side necessarily. So there's a distinction there, right? And I think that, like, first and foremost, my audience, in terms of like the book and whenever I talk about Bitcoin specifically, is to the voter. It's to like the populace. It's to the people who are just sort of thinking about these issues as they fit into their everyday life, and not necessarily as like the target audience being a politician who's making policy decisions and is sort of has all, as we know, like these perverse incentives and pressures from all sorts of constituencies that aren't really sort of the voting public. So I think that when I sit down and I think about Bitcoin as a technology, as a tool, as a better money, there is, in my mind, there's really nothing inherently contradictory from sort of that technology to what I value as somebody who just like votes as a liberal or progressive person. There's nothing really contradictory to that. I think that you have essentially a technology that can't be stopped. As you say, it's ungovernable, but it really just can't be stopped. So it's a tool that helps people, no matter who they are or what their priorities are. So I think that one of my main messages of a few is that if you have like really strong liberal progressive goals that you want to do, like Bitcoin can help you too. Like it's not just helping libertarians achieve like whatever their goals are, it can help you achieve that too, right? So just as one specific example, I think that there's a lot of liberals all over the country who, think that it's important to protect the right to choose, and have a particular stance on like the abortion issue. And we see that those people, right, are going to be in a position where they're going to probably need some sort of like unconfiscatable like money that they can, actually support groups and organizations without getting their bank accounts frozen, or they can support different ideologies that they want to support. It's not just one side of the spectrum, political spectrum. I think it could be anybody. So that goes not just for abortion, it goes for humanitarian aid all across the world. It goes to, sort of undermining authoritarians and dictators who have control over the money in their country. So there's a lot of different ways in which you can sort of look at Bitcoin through a lens and say, yeah, this doesn't contradict the things that I care about. It actually could help. And really the problem, I think, for most liberals and progressives that, are out in the open, right? These are in the real world. Their problem isn't that like Bitcoin has this political ideology. It's just that they don't know anything about Bitcoin, right? So that's like step one. And step two is if they decide that they want to learn more about Bitcoin, then most of the resources out there are assuming that like there's some sort of political lens for libertarians, conservatives, right? So there's not necessarily that those resources out there for somebody who just wants to learn about Bitcoin and does not want to be exposed to like political ideology that they don't agree with. So
Has Bitcoin changed your politics at all?
um I not by much. I kind of like I don't know that being a Bitcoiner or a progressive, when I sat down to write my book, was like I don't think at the time either one of those things was like the most important thing about me. So I'd say that obviously I found some sort of niche within the Bitcoin community, and I appreciate that, and people are interested in talking to me about it. I definitely think that I have found, if anything, I found myself maybe a little bit more skeptical of authority and of government than I probably started as before I started this journey into Bitcoin and writing the book and talking to people. And just sort of like find myself questioning rules that maybe I didn't necessarily question before. But it hasn't like overhauled like the underlying principles of my politics. I don't necessarily 90% of what you see if you're like sort of on Bitcoin Twitter, if it's not about Bitcoin specifically, it's just about like general like tangential topics. Like I don't agree with most of that stuff, and I haven't started to. Like I'm not on a meat only diet and things like that. So there's not been a lot of changes in terms of like my core like political philosophy and like what I consider to be the most important things I believe in. I do think that there's sort of even not that I had zero, but even more skepticism towards like the institutions that are in charge and running, the policy and things like that. So I guess that might be a small shift.
Do you think Bitcoin fixes a lot of issues that the left focuses on?
Yeah, I think that Bitcoin represents sort of step one of the problems that the left focuses on. I don't know that it solves it by itself, right? And I think that one of the things I focus on in the book is just simply saying like, hey, like we have all these problems. We have wealth inequality, we have systematic racism, we have wars going on all the time, we have like military industrial complex. States have absolutely latched onto a narrative that explains all of those things. And I'm not necessarily saying that those explanations are wrong. I think there's probably very complicated issues. But I think that viewing all of those issues and problems that liberals see in like the world as it is now, viewing all of that through a Bitcoin lens sort of opens your mind to different explanations, different possibilities, right? Like wealth inequality in particular is an issue that Bitcoin doesn't fix by itself, but like I said, it's like step one towards finding a better solution, like a more sustainable, like long-lasting solution towards something like that. In as much as you see it as as an important problem. So I think that it doesn't solve and like the environment crisis issue all by itself, but it helps, right? Like so Bitcoin is like one tool of many in sort of the arsenal that we can just employ, deploy and hopefully just make the world a little bit better each day. But there's like there's this whole trope, right? Bitcoin fixes everything. Bitcoin fixes that. I do think that's true. I think it fixes a lot of things, but not everything. And I think that there's quite a few things that it's like starts to fix, and then it's up to people and groups and institutions to sort of do the right thing after that.
What are those collectibles you have behind you there?
Those are pop figures. So my wife started collecting those. She asked me to put up the shelves. So some of them are mine now. Like we've yeah. So they're like Funko Pops, and that's our display. We have a bunch more in the basement in cold storage. Yeah.
So we were talking a little bit on the pre-roll about your experience on the Peter McCormack What Bitcoin Did podcast.
Yeah.
Peter was nice enough to come on my show early on when I first got started, which has helped me, attract some good guests onto the show. So I'm a big fan of Peter. So I want to ask what your experience was going on his show and spending time with Peter.
Yeah, I mean, so Peter has been sort of a champion of at least like the idea of my book, and of me from the very beginning, since he very first learned about what I was doing. So the honest truth is, like, I cold emailed him, like he didn't know who I was, and I didn't even have like a Twitter account, right? Like I just sort of learned about Bitcoin and cared a lot about it, and spent many months and learning as much as I could. I emailed him not to ask to go on his show. Like I just viewed him as somebody who was willing to give airtime to like the other political side within Bitcoin, right? So he does interview people. They're mostly libertarians and like conservatives, but he does interview the other side of the aisle too. So I just wanted to like maybe get a quote from him to put in my book, right? And I expected like the chance he would reply to me was 0.00%. But I think that he views the value of the project that I'm doing, and understands that there's a whole lot of normies out there that just don't know about Bitcoin, and they need like a comfortable way to learn about it. And I think that he thinks that he agrees with me in the sense that like there's this danger that if Bitcoin becomes like politicized and becomes this political football, then there's just no hope of sort of like getting other people on the side willingly to come along to Bitcoin. So he's, like I said, he's been a super champion. He had me on a show, obviously that got a lot of attention. He's a huge person in the space and just a great guy. Like he is absolutely, a gracious host and very helpful. And every time I've needed something or needed a favor or said, hey, can you put me in touch with this person? He absolutely has just followed through with that and been a huge help. So, like my life changed when he replied my email, which I wasn't expecting him to. I thought I was going to be writing a book that nobody would ever hear about, and now it's turned into something else. So all of the gratitude in the world for Peter for sort of getting me my start in the Bitcoin community and sort of helping me make whatever name I have or whatever sort of recognition I have about the project is really originates with him. And he's writing the foreword for my book. So he's going to have like, sort of, the foreword at the beginning of the book explaining like why it's important book for people to read, whether or not you're progressive or conservative. If you care about Bitcoin, you should be handing this book to people that you love, and care about. So, huge help and an absolutely gracious host, took very good care of me and has always been super responsive. So not enough nice things to say about him. I know he gets a lot of like mixed reactions from the Bitcoin community, but like there's not a better ambassador we have. And, it's been a great experience working with him.
Definitely, I've had some similar experience. He's always been pretty responsive when I've shot him a question about Bitcoin or podcasting in general. But we've talked about your book just kind of in a note here a little bit, but maybe we can talk directly about it and the aspiration behind it. Was there a gap you've seen in the market in Bitcoin materials out there, or what was your reasoning for starting this book?
Yeah, I think I look back on it to see the other day, like when did it start, right? And I created a Google document like September 2021 is like when the like that Google document became the book. Um, but that's when I started it. And I'm a teacher. That's my day job, right? So I teach math. I'm dealing like day in and day out explaining concepts to like teenagers about trigonometry or calculus or whatever. And so like I thrive off of that experience of being able to teach things to people and have that aha moment, like, oh, this is why this is important, or this is that connection to this other concept. That's what I do for a living. And one of the things you learn by being a math teacher is that like people do not learn if they're not comfortable, right? Like if they don't feel like they're in a sense of community, or that they're okay to make mistakes or ask questions or things like that, people don't learn well. And that's easy enough to learn if you've been teaching pre-calculus for, 2 decades like I have. So, I remember sitting at my kitchen table, dining room table one day in that September and listening to a podcast, and just like the two people that were talking just were, I think, just operating on the assumption that everybody listening agreed with everything that they were saying in terms of like the politics. And it was really just, frankly, it was off-putting for me as a progressive person. And here I was trying to just learn about the Bitcoin technology, learn about like its impact, learn why it's important, why it's dependable, like why it's not going to go away, like all of those things. I just had this hunger to keep learning more. And it was getting filtered through this lens of like, hey, like, obviously you want the government not to exist, and like me and my guests think that way, and everybody listening thinks that way too. And it just was not an environment where I felt like, okay, I can, like, I felt okay learning because I had a conviction about Bitcoin already, but I kept thinking, hey, if I had somebody that I cared about who agreed with me politically, then it's going to be a huge hurdle for them to get over that hump, right? They're not going to want to learn, be able to learn. They're going to dismiss it. They're going to see it as this partisan thing that's only for a certain kind of people. And so like the idea behind the book was like, geez, like there needs to be some sort of resource out there. And I thought about the skill set that I had, and I don't do I don't create podcasts and I don't do videos, but I thought, like I can probably put together like a resource for people if I wrote a book. Um, and for quite a while, I thought it was just, maybe me and my buddy would write it together, and sort of then we decided we weren't going to do it that way. I was just do it by myself, and never thought that it would actually happen. But here it is, it happened. So yeah, that's the story behind why I decided to write it.
So question then, because you're kind of referring to something you were exposed to that had all these assumptions, political
Yeah.
assumptions that you disagreed with. So you're writing the book through the lens that people are reading are agreeing with you politically then?
Well, I think that ultimately, yeah. So I think that the what I say in the book is that the hope behind the book is that like someday it won't be needed, right? Like I really do think that Bitcoin itself is a technology that's apolitical. It's like, it should be in the future, like email or something like that. And I do think that the goal behind the book is to provide at least a resource for people. Like here's something I can hand to somebody who's a progressive person who wants to learn about Bitcoin. And I say repeatedly in the book, and I give like suggestions and recommendations. Like this isn't the last book you should read either. Like here are the other ones. So I think that once people get a conviction for Bitcoin and they understand its importance, then they go off on their own and they read or they research or they listen to whatever they want, and just keep getting a knowledge about Bitcoin. I think that that's many people in the space have that story, right? Like once I understood it, then I just keep wanting to learn more.
Mhm.
So it's really like in a sense like almost like a stopgap, right? It's just a resource that doesn't exist yet. All of the other resources might be for this population be off-putting, and this is just to get them through the door, get them like, okay, now I can understand Bitcoin. It's written in a way that's not off-putting to me. I'm going to continue my journey to learn more and more. And then hopefully in 5, 10 years, like a book, like mine is absolutely not needed, right? Like there's no reason to have like a progressive case for Bitcoin because it's just normal. It's not tied to any political ideology. There's no hurdle for people to get over who are new to the space. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand what you're saying there. It's just kind of born in that libertarian space, right? So we're still in the early days of Bitcoin. There's still lots of growth to go, and I think eventually it'll just be so wide and accepted that people from all walks of life will be able to utilize it. My next question is about your students. You mentioned you're a math teacher, and I'm sure you have some curious students. And when you speak to them about Bitcoin, what's the approach there? Because you're dealing with children and people that don't really understand the grand scheme of things. Bitcoin is so multidisciplinary. How do you
Yeah.
approach it with children or teenagers?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Like there's a good mix of students that I teach. I teach at the high school level. So this is like ninth through 12th grade. And there's a interesting mix of people who are absolutely like all in. Maybe they already know like a good chunk about Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, like they're plugged into it, and then like people who don't care at all, like that's not it's not interested there. So like there's a whole spectrum. And plenty of times I think that the kids are genuinely interested. They'll ask me about it. They understand like I'm writing a book, and it's, I'm kind of knowledgeable about Bitcoin and how it works and things like that. So number one, thing, if I'm in a position where students just get to ask me questions and we can go one-on-one, it's almost like a lightning drill. Like, yeah, but it's not worth anything because it's just on the internet, like just one after the other, like they're going to ask me their questions, and it's mostly just dispelling misconceptions and FUD that they've heard or that they're assuming, right? I think if you take a step back, it's hard. It might be hard for people in the Bitcoin space to actually appreciate the fact that it's like it really makes good sense to like just dismiss Bitcoin out of hand. That's like the real probabilistic like good bet. If you're not going to spend any time learning about it, like this is a thing that exists on the internet. It's money that's not actually money. I'm not going to really spend time thinking about it. Like it's not completely irrational. Like if that makes sense, because like almost everything else that's like that, you could dismiss out of hand and you'd be correct to do so. So getting people over that initial hump of saying, all right, I actually want to learn about it. Like I have somebody who in my life now who's a role model, like if that's a teacher or a friend who I trust and I know that they're pretty smart and clever and thoughtful. Like I see them into Bitcoin now. I want to learn more. Like getting past that hump and just sort of having an opportunity to answer questions and just dispel misconceptions and say, well, how does it actually work? What if I want to do this and like, and this happens, can somebody block it or whatever? And I think that those are fun days for me. I leave those days at school feeling really energized because you can see that spark in the kids' eyes, right? Like, oh my goodness, like I didn't realize that it was actually, like like so impactful, or I didn't have any idea that there was like a 21 million cap on Bitcoin, or you can sort of go down the list of sort of light bulb moments for them in that day. And those are fun days for me. So I think that it's one thing that I hear a lot from people, oh, you deal with teenagers, they must be totally into Bitcoin and they must really understand the technology. And really that's not the case for 99% of my students. They're just sort of exposed to it through the media the way everybody else is, and they don't understand it. So it's good to be able to answer their questions and sort of help them get over that initial misconception wall, into an interesting spot. Yeah.
Now, kids are drawn to new things, new trends, NFTs, play to earn. How do you approach the altcoin space with your students and people in general?
Yeah, I mean, I personally am Bitcoin only and have been, and I just describe it like that, right? Like I'm very careful when I'm answering questions for people. Like I'm not trying to give anybody financial advice or what to do with their money. I really focus on sort of the educational aspect of it, right? So I get colleagues who will say to me like, "Oh, they'll ask me a few questions about Bitcoin. I'll try to answer them honestly, as to my level of understanding. And then they're saying, okay, so you're telling me I should buy Bitcoin. And I'm like, no, I'm telling you, you should learn more about Bitcoin, right? Like I'm not telling you to buy Bitcoin. So the answer is the same. If somebody's asking me about altcoins or NFTs or something like that, I'll just tell them that, that's not for me. And here's why. Like, I think that Bitcoin has a chance to be new money and replace money, and some of these other cryptocurrency projects maybe have potential as something else, but I don't think that any of them replace money the way Bitcoin does. And just sort of answer honestly and try to not lean them one way or the other. I think, in my high school, we applied, some students and me, like wanted me to be the faculty advisor for the Bitcoin Club. So they wanted to create a Bitcoin club and have me be faculty advisor. And that application got denied. It was too specific. So we weren't allowed to make a Bitcoin club. So they made a crypto club instead. So I'm the faculty advisor for the crypto club. And some of the kids who come to those clubs have other interests in addition to Bitcoin. And that's, I guess that's fine. I just try to, like I said, answer the questions as honestly as I can about sort of what my philosophy is and what my beliefs are about it. So
Some Bitcoiners may say you are the head of the shitcoin club.
right. Yeah, we're not allowed to do that at school though. And certainly in my role, not that, I guess people come at me maybe, like it's the title of crypto club, right? And I run it personally, like when I have a choice, like everything's about Bitcoin. So it's not like I sort of secretly am making it a Bitcoin only club. Without telling the administration because they think that it needs to be crypto only. Of course, the kids are coming into it. They're curious, right? They're young and they want to know about NFTs and things like that. So like there's educational moments in there too, right? But I'm certainly not promoting any of that other stuff. But yeah. So
How do you explain the halving to people? Is it something that you emphasize, or how long into the conversation before you might bring it up?
yeah, well, it's good. I mean, the halving in particular is great if you teach high school math, right? Because it's a good introduction into like the geometric sequence and why it is that you can add up, these numbers and it comes up to be 21 million. It's absolutely real life application of like a concept that we teach in algebra 2, which is awesome. So it's just like a finite geometric series, and each halving cycle, like the amount that you're adding gets cut in half, right? Common ratio 1/2. So it's great. Like in terms of the mathematical content, I think that that's good. When I'm talking to other people that aren't my students and it's not applicable to like the curriculum, I just try to explain it in a way that emphasizes the scarcity, right? Like every single time this happens, every 4 years, the amount of money, amount of Bitcoin that's put into circulation, new Bitcoin is cut in half, and like have them think through and ask questions about like what are the implications of that? Like why is that important? And in the long term, in the short term, like what does that do for the security of the network? What does that do for these people who have invested money in their mining rigs or mining companies? All of those things has like broad ranging implications all the way through. But I think it's always tied into sort of this scarcity and why scarcity is one component of having good money, one of many. And I think it just makes for an interesting conversation. I don't think, obviously, like the idea of a halving is new for anybody new to Bitcoin, right? So like that idea is interesting, and then it's always fun to sort of compare that to sort of the known schedule of issuance, and we know what's going to happen for the next 120 years, and we know what's going to happen for the next 10,000 years, and we don't know what's going to happen in next month, when we read the Fed meeting minutes, you know what I mean? So like there's an absolutely great juxtaposition between what we have, the system we have in Bitcoin, that's sort of algorithms are set and can't really be changed, and we know what to expect, versus human beings that are tied into politics making decisions about money, is a huge differentiation to make. And that doesn't, it might be that some conservatives, libertarians think like, oh, well, that might turn progressives. They don't. It doesn't. Like the idea that like the Federal Reserve is not part of the government and they're making decisions about how money is issued or how much is made or what the inflation rate is, all that stuff. That's not like a turn off for progressives. They want to learn more about it. It doesn't contradict any of the sort of like the fundamental principles. So you can have those kinds of conversations even with progressive people who don't necessarily like champion this. Well, we have to end the Fed and like all of that stuff, right? They just want to learn more, and it's an interesting juxtaposition to have the Bitcoin versus this other thing that they kind of know, but they don't really.
Now, folks that are, that want to actually purchase Bitcoin after learning about it from you, or people that you see coming in the space that are just buying Bitcoin, do you push cold storage onto them, or do you kind of wait until they have a certain amount?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I always try to highlight the idea that, you know, you need to take ownership of your own keys. Like if you want, like if you're not doing that and you're just buying Bitcoin and you hold it on an exchange or whatever in a hot wallet or something, you don't really own it. You know, like the same way that the money in the bank is not really yours if you read the fine print, that kind of thing. So I try the best that I can. Obviously I've convinced a number of people through my time to invest at least a little bit into Bitcoin and buy some. And I'm always talking to them about cold storage. So and not always with like the best success, right? Like it's almost like they need to touch the stove themselves before they learn. But I'm just texting my buddy the other day, like, hey, you know what? Like, I know I sent you that document that sort of explains how to put your Bitcoin into cold storage. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to like walk you through it, like, so I'm sort of constantly doing that and just nudging people. Certainly, it's hard for me. Like, I don't want to see somebody that I care about get into Bitcoin and they have like a like a lot of money in it, and then they make some mistake with it. So like trying to educate on that level too, I think that's part of it, right? Like if I'm going to feel like I've done a responsible job, just like if you really truly understand Bitcoin, then the cold storage is just an obvious thing that you need to be aware of too, and to implement. And I just literally 2 days ago, I was talking to a different friend of mine, and we're talking about, I got him to actually get a cold wallet, like put his Bitcoin on the cold wallet, like and secure it. And he's got his seed phrase. So, well, what did you do with this seed phrase? And let's just say his answer did not impress me in terms of security. So I was like, all right, well, we need to work on that. You know what I mean? Like we need you to like actually do something different with that seed phrase to help protect you. So it's an ongoing conversation, and just I think I consider it part of the educational like journey that people go on for sure.
Now you have a Kickstarter.
Mm.
Did you want to mention that?
No, well, the Kickstarter is expired, but like
Okay.
the time of it has gone. So like I appreciate that, but that was an opportunity for people to pre-order the book. The book will come out this spring, early summer. So that's the timeline for the book. What I will mention is if people want to learn more about the book, or they just want to check out some of the details of what I have in it, then they can go to a website that I have set up. It's called bitcoinprogressive.com. So I think that's a good opportunity for people to just sort of check out sort of what I have outlined there, and then see there's a way to sign up to get notifications when the book comes out. But we're looking at the late spring, early summer. It's being published by Bitcoin Magazine, which is a huge opportunity. I'm so grateful for them. It's been great working with them too. So shout out to Bitcoin Magazine. So they're going to be publishing the book, and it will be out, in a couple of months, which is unbelievable. It's exciting.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited too to read
Yeah.
something from the other side, and a different perspective going into Bitcoin. So I'm super excited. Hope you got me on a short list for getting a copy there. I got a little bit of a collection going on here with some
Yeah,
signed
yeah.
autograph books. So I'd love
All
to
right.
add
Yeah.
to it, man.
Yeah,
Um,
no problem. I got you. You're on my list. And
awesome.
maybe I'll just end like, like I said, the website's bitcoinprogressive.com, but like what I didn't know is that there is a small and like dedicated group of like people who consider themselves Bitcoin progressives, out there. And like it's not necessarily easy to find them, but like through my journey of writing the book, I've been put in touch with a lot of great people, and I'm just really grateful for the whole community. Even people who don't necessarily agree with my politics understand the importance of educating people and sort of meeting them where they are. So it's really been a fascinating experience. I'm just so grateful for it. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, really awesome. And it's great to see people from, like I said, all walks of life coming together, and seeing Bitcoin bring people together as well. So I'm gonna wrap it up there, Jason. If you have any last words of wisdom, comments, if not, just let us know where we can follow you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Good talk. I mean, I think that the number one thing for me is just to continue to learn. Like my colleague that was like, "Oh, you're telling me to buy Bitcoin." The answer is no, just keep learning about Bitcoin. You spend your 10,000 hours and you're still going to have more to learn. So that's my push, and just try to meet people where they are. If you're trying to educate other people about Bitcoin, don't force it. Just meet them where they are. So if you want to know more about the book, the website's bitcoinprogressive.com. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's C Jason Maier on Twitter. And I would love to, reach out. DMs are open if anybody has any questions. And I try to be as responsive as possible on those platforms. So.
Okay, folks, go to bitcoinprogressive.com. Check out all our show notes, and I'll have all your links down below. I really appreciate your time in doing this, Jason. I hope you have a great weekend, man.
Thanks, Brad. Appreciate it.
Hey, you. Thanks for listening to the Halving Report podcast. Check out our show notes below, like the episode, and share it with a friend. Be sure to go to halvingreport.com, where you can get a $30 discount on the BitFi device. BitFi is our official hardware wallet partnership of the show. Use our coupon code from our website at halvingreport.com/BitFi. And if you'd like to get into Bitcoin, purchase your first cryptocurrency for the first time, you can go to bitfi.ca/halving.